One of the most obvious questions that came up after the 1986 disaster at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was whether or not wildlife would suffer from mutations. Hundreds of people died soon after the accident, and along with birth defects, many more have contracted cancer. But scientists around the world were completely surprised to find that the wildlife in the exclusion zone came back much sooner than had been predicted, and life seems to be doing well considering the circumstances. Many researchers thought that life would take decades, maybe centuries to come back from the accident, but it didn't. And animals are doing rather well for the most part today. But they weren't surprised at the effects of the radiation, and not all of them were spared. 10 years later, it appears that both the wild animals and the domestic ones left behind were indeed affected, having been born with major birth defects such as multiple heads, muzzles, and legs. They also found other defects such as a cat with 2 faces, a lamb with 8 legs, a 2-faced calf, and another calf with legs growing from its back. Plants have also suffered, including the so-called red forest, a stand of dead, discolored pines that were killed by radiation. The Chernobyl stalkers are a truly bizarre subculture. They were born out of the suppression and oppression of Soviet history, along with the influx of American-style commercialism that helped breed corruption, and then economic crisis in Russia and the Ukraine, or at least that's what some experts think. In short, stalkers are those who enter the 621 square mile, 1,000 kilometers exclusion zone illegally, apparently for their own morbid curiosity, kind of like the so-called rubberneckers, who, when driving by the scene of an accident, just can't help but strain their necks to gawk as they go by. The phenomenon was legitimized in 2007 when Ukrainian computer programmers introduced STA-LKR, a post-apocalyptic first-person shooter video game that takes place in a virtual exclusion zone around Pripyat and Chernobyl. The acronym stands for scavengers, trespassers, adventurers, loners, killers, explorers, and robbers. The creators of the game said they wanted to get the word out to the world about Chernobyl, and of course, make a cool video game. Stalker has done well, selling over 5 million copies, including 5 sequels sold mainly in Russia and Eastern Europe. High up on the roof of the Pripyat City Hospital, #126, a sign ironically reminded the residents of the freshly minted Soviet model city, Health of the Nation, the country's wealth. Situated in the micro-district of Pripyat on Druzhby-Narodov Street, the hospital's main wing is part of a sprawling medical complex called MS 126. Pripyat City Hospital had 410 beds, with clinics and outpatient facilities fanning out that were interconnected. Complete with a dental clinic, maternity ward, infectious disease clinic, and a morgue, the city had been prepared for any emergency they could have imagined. The operative word, of course, being imagined, for nobody had foreseen the horrific events of the 26th of April, 1986. Normally a busy hospital anyway, after reactor #4 went into meltdown on that fateful night. This is where 237 plant workers, firefighters, and soldiers ended up being treated for severe radiation poisoning, many to never leave alive. According to a 2006 World Health Organization (WHO) report, 28 firemen and rescue personnel died within the first 3 months. The victims' clothes were so radiated they had to be taken to the basement of the hospital, where they remain to this day. Eventually, victims were taken to Moscow, where the only facility able to treat radiation victims resided. Hospital documents and medical instruments lay strewn about in haphazard chaos, and the basement is the most radiated location in the city and had to be abandoned within just days of the incident due to the skyrocketing radiation levels. To this day, many think the place is haunted, since during a paranormal investigation of Chernobyl, the Destination Truth team from the Sci-Fi Channel discovered multiple human-like figures moving through frame in video surveillance taken of the hospital. Earth has both a magnetic field and an atmosphere that protects us from dangerous radiation, neutrinos, and cosmic rays from the sun and outer space. NASA knows all too well that astronauts on the International Space Station, ISS, get exposed to 20 times the radiation we get down here on the planet. and that it presents a serious problem to not only the crew, but sensitive electronics also. So after discovering that a fungus called Cladosporium sphaerospermum, thriving around the heavily radiated Chernobyl disaster site, consumes radiation through radiosynthesis, they decided to experiment with it in space, and over the course of a month, found out that the fungus actually blocks radiation literally by eating it. The experiments on the ISS revealed that Cladosporium was utilizing melanin to transform radioactive gamma rays into chemical energy, and that this ability may turn out to be useful in future space exploration. They are hoping that the fungus may be used to both shield equipment and the crew from deadly radiation during long space flights, and even more importantly, help clean up radioactive waste. There is a new phenomena dubbed dark tourism, and the Chernobyl disaster site and the city of Pripyat are on the top of the list, and quite literally comprise the hottest tourist destination in the Ukraine, no pun intended. In commemoration of the 35th anniversary of the historic tragedy, and made possible by the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ukraine International Airlines started offering aerial tours the day before the anniversary of that fateful day when reactor number 4 went into meltdown on the 26th of April 1986, giving their passengers a unique view of the abandoned nuclear power plant and the city of Pripyat for around $106 USD, 2,970 Ukraine hryvnia. Their ticket gets them a seat with a panoramic view of the city and the exclusion zone from just above the minimum allowed altitude of 3,000 feet, 900 m, above Chernobyl on a Embraer 195 jetliner, with a chance to have a selfie taken with the pilot. Although ground-based tours of the Chernobyl control room and reactor hash 4 are available, a hazmat suit is required, making aerial tours an instant hit with tourists, with the premiere selling out in 2 days. Although the coronavirus has severely dampened tourism to the disaster site, it hasn't stopped it. In 2019, 104,000 tourists visited Chernobyl, whereas in 2020, only 32,000 did, with the highly popular HBO series Chernobyl accounting for 80% of that figure. Chernobyl and Pripyat continue to be visited illegally in spite of the dangers and the threat of very large fines that can be levied against those who get caught engaging in their dark obsession.